Hello everyone, welcome to the channel and welcome to the workshop. It is a nice brisk morning this morning, and today we're going to be working on something that's kind of sad. Might be determining the fate of a family woodworking heirloom in the workshop. Go in and take a look. So the cornerstone of any workshop, in my opinion, is a woodworking workshop, I should say, is a good table saw. This table saw has been passed down through the years from my dad before me and my grandpa before him. It is a Craftsman 113 series. It's a pretty popular table saw back in its day. It has been a good table saw and actually still has some good traits about it. The table platform is still very flat and usable, and the motor that drives the blade is a good motor. Still works well. It's a 220 volt, I believe. I'm gonna have to look again. I'll put the plate up in the video to show you. But through the years, I've had to do some maintenance on this saw to kind of keep it going. Put a new toggle power switch on it. I've had to do some work on the wings. I added a little bit of an extension over here. That's helped me with some material. I've had to shim the motor mount. The fence is seen better days. I've actually purchased an upgrade fence system that I will have to pull the rail off the mount, put a new mount system and a rail. I'll put an image up on the video of what I'm going to potentially go to if this works out. If it doesn't work out, I'm not sure yet if I'll go to that extent. The mount that I had to fix on the motor adjustment, the blade and the fence were no longer parallel and aligned with one another. The blade was kind of out just a hair, so anything that after you pushed the material through, you had quite a bit of space to allow the material to kind of move, so I had to fix that. I have dealt with the legs down here, kind of created a box system, which I don't have the glass in now. I have plexiglass and a vacuum system, kind of dust collection. I've put some caster steps on the legs so you can step on these casters. It mounts or locks the caster wheel down, and then you can move the table saw around in your shop. There's probably other things that I've done too, just can't think of at the moment. But the problem that I've had of recent, I try to get to this so I don't bore you to death, but anybody that's watching this is probably not looking for a super exciting video. The way that this table saw works as far as your adjustments go. So you have two main adjustments. This wheel here will adjust the blade up and down elevation. And this knob here that spins is your miter adjustment, and it'll swing your angles. So this is the adjustment in concern today. This knob here, when you push it in, it locks your height adjustment. And if you can see, there's a knob right up here. When you lock this knob, this locks your miter adjustment also. So of recent, and I say recent, the past couple years, I've had problems with my miter adjustment going to 90 degrees and staying there. So when you crank it over and it's close to zero, I have noticed in the past that my cuts are not exact. So I'm not going to crank this down hard or tight to the 90-degree angle, because that's going to show you the problem that I'm having. I'll get to that in just a second. Let's say I have cranked it down as far as I can get it to the 90-degree angle. So I noticed some of my cuts, like I said, are not cutting nice and square. So I got a square out on my table up against the blade. And I'm going to shine a light behind here to kind of show you, hopefully. So this is the problem that I've kind of been having. When I'm touching up here, I've got a gap at the bottom. So the miter leans to the left whenever you crank the miter down. So if I was going to a 45, the blade would go to the left. So when you go back up, it's not going all the way back up to a 90, even as much as you try to go back up. So I've been trying to figure out why and what to do about it. So the other day I had a family member out, and he was helping me try to get to the bottom of what was going on. And I've noticed that recently when you do try to crank the miter down to 90 and you're trying to get it to that 90 because it won't go, so you're cranking it harder, it'll actually pop. A popping noise occurs underneath somewhere, and it will actually shudder back about a degree or two, and then you can go back, kind of go back and forth, and I'll try to show you here what it's doing. So we're gonna work our way back. So I'm at about 10 and I'm trying to get it to 90. So you can see it won't lock and it falls back a degree. So there's lots of things that you can do with the table saw, but the most important thing, even in its most basic setting, is having a 90-degree blade that you can run material through. So if you can't get the blade to 90 degrees, it's kind of mute. The table saw is kind of worthless. So you got to get this fixed, got to get this figured out if this table saw is going to continue to be used. So I've had this table saw apart before, and when I say apart, I mean the mounting legs off of the main motor base. Wants to shim the motor mount and also to redo the way these legs are mounted. So I learned a little bit whenever I did that, but we kind of did some work on it the other day to try to figure out what was going on, and I learned a little bit more. So I'll try to show you how some of these adjustments work and how what happens whenever you're making these adjustments. So if you can see in here, there is a gear with some teeth and another offset shaft. So this shaft here is the one that will be spinning with the handle, and it spins that gear with the teeth. And then I have another offset shaft over here at a 90-degree angle. So whenever I turn my miter adjustment, it spins this shaft. Hold on, it's in the way. And then it turns the 90-degree shaft, which is working a mechanism that moves the motor back and forth, which I can't see, and that's part of the initial problem, and I'll get to that here in just a little bit. We'll figure that out. So first off, take in mind that I'm not an expert on these saws. This is just me trying to work myself through the problem and trying to get this thing figured out. When you're talking about trying to work on a table saw from potentially the 60s or 70s, there's not exactly some place that you can go to. So a lot of this you're just going to have to figure out and work on yourself. So this is me just trying to work myself through figuring out what's going on. All right, so let's look up in here. I wish I had another set of hands I could kind of show this easier, but these gears down here are, and I'm not sure how well my camera focuses in real close. It doesn't do a very good job. These are the adjustments for the height. That rod and those teeth. And this is similar to what's back up there that I can't see until I take everything apart. There we go. I'm going to use my phone camera. It zooms a little bit better. So that adjustment right there is how the height works. Let me see if I can try to spin it without. So, looking back over there, you can see the spindle comes down, and then you have this gear and then the 90-degree gear that goes back up that you can't see. So what happens when you get to 90 degree? There has to be some kind of stop, right? So that's what, I'll put some cool little arrows when I'm editing, but that's what this bolt right here is. It's kind of hard to see. So that's what that bolt is there. And it will hit this flat part of the platform on the back side of this motor mount. Will hit that whenever it gets to 90. So you can actually adjust that bolt. If you can see here, there is a screw head right here, which is an Allen head, and you can put an Allen key in there and you can rotate it and turn it, and it will move that screw up and down to adjust your stop for your 90 degrees. So whenever it hits this, it hits it at the point where you're actually right at 90 degrees. But that is not the problem in this case. It's going to be difficult to show because I can't get my phone in here while I'm cranking this. But whenever you crank the motor back to 90, it doesn't even touch that bolt. It pops like I was showing you before, and it just falls. So we got to figure out why it's falling and what's causing it to fall. So there is a sheet metal panel on the back side of the saw that you can remove, and you can get a better look down in. And if you see, there's the tip of the screw back there, and that is what I need to get to be able to view the problem. So the other day, to assess this portion, I had a family member here. We just took everything off and picked this thing up, turned it upside down on the table here where I could get to look underneath easily, and did it that way. Today I'm by myself, and I'm gonna have to do some pretty serious surgery on this thing anyway. So we're gonna disassemble the whole table saw and take it, turn it upside down over here where it's just the center mount, which will be easier for one person, still pretty heavy. But we're gonna have to do that to do the surgery that we're getting ready to have to possibly do. Let me try to show how this works a little bit better. So this rod that goes through here has two handles. You basically have a rod inside of a rod. And this handle is the inner handle, and it raises and lowers the elevation of the motor to make the blade deeper or shallower. The other handle is the outer rod, and it spins this gear tooth, which has another shaft at 90-degree angle, which spins. And this is what we could not see, but it spins this bolt. And you can see there's another arc, kind of like how this is at a, show it from a different angle, but it has a little bit of an arc. And the same thing goes for that one down there. It's hard to show. But whenever that turns, you have kind of a worm gear action. So I'm going to, the problem is on the other side. So I have to move the miter setting, if I can do it here, all the way to almost a 45 so you can see from the other side. Let me move to the other side. So that is the problem. As you can see on the upper portion, the gear teeth are actually still in almost pristine condition. But down here towards the middle where the screw rides, when you are at almost a 90-degree angle, the teeth are just completely chewed away from pressure and use over time, and they have been broken. So I've got a few options here. Maybe this, it's hard to get in here to show anything, but this mechanism, this arbor here, can be replaced. So I've got that part on order, should be here, and it might be the right part, might not be. It's hard to get parts on these old machines, but we're going to try to replace that. I don't really know a solution other than that, besides if that is not the right part and I can't get the right part, I'm going to have to try to just force it into 90 degrees somehow, and then JB weld it or something in place, and you just will never be able to use the miter setting again. I don't really know what else to do. Like I said, if I can't get it to 90, the saw is worthless. So I need to at least get it back into use at 90, and then maybe just be a rip saw. And then end up having to get another saw, which is not a bad thing, but budget is the problem with that. So let's see if we can get this thing apart, get that arbor off, and I'll show you two a little bit closer. After getting those handles off, which was a bit of a bear, I needed some TLC before I can put them back on, but you got a better shot of the inner shaft versus the outer one. That turns the elevation. This one turns the miter. So now I need to get the casing off of the table, the back side of the table. And there are 1, 2, 3. There are 3 bolts holding that on. So here's what it looks like with the shroud off. Now with everything apart, you can kind of see the bottom of the tabletop now. This is the screw for the 45 stop, and this is the screw for the 90-degree stop. If you're still with me at this point, I really appreciate you hanging in there. You are a trooper. It's only been a few seconds for you guys, but it's been a couple months for me. I have really had to work hard to try to figure out what to do about this part. I've searched high and low trying to find a part for this to replace it. There's only a few places that you can look, although I've tried to look everywhere, and you can't find parts for these old pieces of equipment like this. It's not very easy. I've actually gone to some yard sales and some auctions. The 113 table saw is a pretty popular Craftsman table saw. It has a bunch of different submodels, and I found a couple parts, but they weren't the right parts. This is also a 12-inch 113 table saw, which makes it a little bit even rarer. I think on the last video, or the early portion of the video, I'm sorry, I discussed that I had ordered a part, and I did, and it came in, but it was not the right part, not even close to being the right part. Probably fits some other model, so I'll show you the part here after a while, and if you need it for your table saw, hit me up and I'll get it your way. But turned out I reached out after striking out for so long trying to find a part. I reached out to a friend of mine that does machine work, and I asked him if he would just look at this part, this piece, and it's actually called a trunnion gear is what the owner's manual describes it as. I'll show you the owner's manual that I found. I don't have the original owner's manual, but I found on Vintage Machinery, I found a copy of one with the exploded parts list and a few other things. It was pretty interesting. It's good information to have, and I'll show you that here, put it up on the screen. But so I reached out to this friend of mine. Huge shout out to Eric. I don't know if he'll watch this video or not, but he looked at it and he thought it was fixable. The place that he works, that does the machine work, doesn't have a gear cutting device, from what he said. So take in mind that I'm not a machinist. I'm just getting this information. I'm reporting it secondhand from him. But he does not have a machine that can do it, but he said that they could try to do it. And try is better than nothing, because if you think about it, if you have a part that is broke on one of these old machines and it can't be replaced or fixed, then what is the ultimate cost, or how much value would you put on that part? So if you were going to if that machine is now shot, it's not usable, it's basically junk, you're going to have to scrap it out, you know, and you're going to have to buy a new table saw, like for example in this situation, and that new table saw is going to cost you, you know, $3,000, $4,000 or whatever. So that part, in essence, that part that completely takes this out of action, you know, that part cost, basically the value of it is, in my opinion, the cost of having to replace the whole saw. So that's a $3,000 or $4,000 more part. So I was willing to do whatever it would take to try to get this thing fixed. And he put a lot of work into it. And once again, big shout out to him, and he got it done. It is a slight, when you look at it, and I'll show you here in just a second, but when you look at it, it is tiny little differences. The teeth are a little bit wider, but we're gonna put it together and we're gonna try to make this thing work. So let's go take a look at it. So one thing I would like to add real quick, short little monologue, is I had to re-record this a little bit, and I lost 4 or 5 clips from whenever I was originally putting this saw back together. It's all been re-recorded. Some of it's been re-recorded. I've been having a lot of problems with my recording media. The main recording media that I use is a GoPro. So if there are any other YouTube creators, video makers out there that use primarily GoPro also, and if you have been having problems or have chronic problems with yours, so I'll get card error, disk error, format errors, battery errors. I'll have a battery that says it's 50 or 60% and it'll completely die, and then it seems like almost exactly at the same time I'll have some kind of disk error, card error, and it'll be 4 or 5 clips deep into the disc. Let's say I'm recording my 6th clip, stopping and going, you know, a little bit here and there, however you have to do to create your videos in general. I'll lose the whole disc. It'll completely delete the whole disc, which is extremely frustrating. So once again, real short, if anybody else out there is having problems, I'd love for one of you guys to reach out to me and explain to me if you've figured out what it is. I've tried to reformat using the GoPro. I've reformatted using my computer, my laptop. I've done both. The disc will kind of work for a little while and then it won't. So basically I end up just throwing the disc away and having to start with a brand new disc, and maybe that's the solution. There is no solution. You just have to get a new disc. I don't know, but holler at me if you had these problems before. Thanks. So here is the trunnion gear. You can see, I'll put up on the screen pictures of before and after. You can see where the new shinier metal is. He basically had to grind out the bad spot. This is cast, so he superheated the metal and welded back and then machined and cut away for new. But if you can see, hopefully this zooms in decently, the new teeth are a little bit, what I'm gonna say, fatter, wider than the old. So I gave him this also. This is the screw. I didn't film this, but I took this out of the trunnion gear case, or the carriage, so he could measure the teeth and try his best to match. And I think he did a good job. I think the old teeth, maybe the reason that they are, because the new ones match up this bolt pretty closely. I'm going to try to explain this by paraphrasing. I'm not the one that's a machinist, but I'm going to try to paraphrase here using his words. But there were multiple complications with what was going on. First of all, I think maybe these new teeth per him match up with the teeth on the bolt. The other ones, the older ones, are narrower. Maybe it was made that way. Maybe they have worn down over time. But there were multiple complications that he had. First of all, when you put this into something to machine it, you got to get a hold of it. So he had complications getting a hold of this into a nice sturdy hold so you can work on it. This bottom portion down here, I'm not sure if you can see, this bottom portion down here is not 90 degrees to this side, and it is not parallel with this. So he had complications there. The threads they're not just straight across at a 90 degree to this. He said they run at about a 3.5, I'm gonna exaggerate here, but they're gonna run at about a 3.5 degrees. You also have an arc. So there are multiple challenges, and he said his machine shop is not set up to cut gears, so they kind of had to make do, and I think they did a pretty good job. We're gonna put together and see how it fits. Hopefully it doesn't bind and it's not too tight, but we're gonna try to put it back together. Hopefully I remember how to put this dude back together in all the pieces. Everything is sitting over here in pieces, and we'll try to get everything on the workbench and put everything back together. So I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to see it. This was extremely difficult to get out. I did not film it. Basically slides through here, here, and here. It slides up through there. Had to loosen this. Fits onto that gear right there. And then there's also a collar that goes in there where that hole is. These are very, very tight. So I cleaned the bolt up. I'm gonna call this a bolt. I cleaned this up as good as I could without doing any damage to it. And then I think I need to try to clean out this just a little bit. I don't want to create any slop, but it literally does not want to go in. So we're going to do some work here, try to get this thing back in without damaging it. I'm gonna have to turn this and find that hole. It's all spinning at the moment. And then this, also I need to find that flat spot right there. Very close. Probably hard for you to see, but that is very, very close to my pin mark. Okay. See, seems to be working. So I'm really close to my stop there. I don't want to force it. I actually adjusted that stop, mistakenly thinking that that was going to help when this problem first started. So I don't want to go any further. I'm going to tighten these up. I have no idea what the specs are. But these new teeth appear to work just fine without binding. I'm on them right now. I'm fully on them right now. So I'm happy with that. Now I just got to figure out how to put the carriage and everything back together, if I can recall. And then once the carriage is put back together, I'll flip it over and then try to figure out getting it exactly to 90 like I need to. Stand by. Click. 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 Okay. Big dummy didn't put the motor on yet. Okay, so I've got the blade adjusted, putting a square against the table in the blade, and I've got this marked now. There is a stop bolt screw right here for the miter adjustment, and then there's one over here on this side for the 0 and the 45. So I adjusted this before all this was said and done off camera, because I was thinking that maybe I could adjust this, and that last little bit before it was given away, I could adjust it. I really didn't know that was happening. So my game plan here is to look at this, to see it from below. I flip this thing back over again, but my blade's on, so it doesn't really do me a lot of good. You can look up through this opening here, if you can see that opening there, but it is very difficult to see whether it's touching or not. So my game plan here is to turn this down until it touches the motor, and then slightly try to tighten it and see if that moves the inclination of the blade at all. So let's see if we can do that and see what happens. Oh yeah, so it wasn't even touching. So I'm tightening it, which drives the screw down to touch it, and I can feel resistance there, so it's pretty snug. So what I'm going to try to do, I'm not going to force anything, but I'm going to try to turn it a little bit, and I'm going to watch the light against this again to see if that moves the blade at all. Yes, it does. So I'm going to back it off a little bit, and then I'm going to so right there, I think it's about as close as I'm going to be able to get it. I'm actually turn the blade slightly. I'm not touching a tooth, but I'm touching the top of the blade, touching the bottom of the blade. There's a little bit of light in the middle, but it might be either warped blade or my... So I tinkered with everything a little bit off camera. I don't really have any precision tools that I trust enough to kind of do this with. But I compared this small square that I have with some of my other squares, and this one is definitely better. So I got the blade perfectly 90 with this square. I got this snug, and then I got the degree marking down here. So, and honestly, as close as this is, I don't do a very good job of explaining this in the video, but this is 90 degrees all day long on this saw blade. It's close enough. It's accurate, more accurate than I need for the work that I personally do woodworking, so it's good to go, and we're going to go with it. Don't over tighten. All the way up. Motor down. Motor up. So this is not the end of this project. I got one bolt in each leg that'll hold it for now. I got the carriage and the trunnion back in. I got it, it'll work, works good. So you can tell it turns really good now. It'll go to 90 good. The motor will raise and lower good. So that's where I'm gonna stop part one of this, but I'm not done with this project. I don't have my fence guide back on yet. I've got another I got an idea. I bought a new fence and a plan from Very Super Cool Tools to put a new guide on, and up in the rafters somewhere up here, if you can see, I've got a new fence and a new guide lock. So in part two of this, I'm going to get that new guide rail on. I'm going to get the new fence on, and then I also bought a new starter switch. The old switch, which is a good decent paddle switch. This is actually one that I put on a few years ago, not the original. But let's say the power went off and the switch, or the motor was still going when the power went off. Not that I turned it off, but let's say the power in the building or whatever went off. When the power came back on, the saw would come back on, which is a little bit dangerous. Not terribly dangerous, not like that really could happen, but you never know. So they make a magnetic switch, so if you turn it off or it's on and you lose power, it'll kill the switch. So if the power comes back on, the saw won't come back on. You actually have to turn it back on again. So this is a safer switch, more expensive switch, heavier switch, and I'm going to replace that along with the fence and the rail guide. So that'll be part two. I'm really happy. I'm really pumped. I got this thing back to working. I did not think that it was actually going to happen. I really appreciate you guys watching. I appreciate you joining me. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving me a thumbs up, give me a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. I'm trying to get my channel going. The more subscribers that I get and the more likes I get, it helps the channel and allows me to continue to make some videos. So join me on part 2. And thanks again, guys. I'll see you on the next one. Later.